All right, so today we're going to be talking about the components of the annual assessment plan, specifically, the big pieces, mission, the goals and the SMART outcomes, measures, how that's all related. And then just as important and often overlooked, the step of the findings and improvement plans. And certainly, as you're in this initial planning phase, now that we're about to start the fiscal year, it's probably the last thing you're thinking about. But as you develop your goals and your outcomes, you definitely want to be thinking, looking back on the previous year about, what the findings were and how you want to move forward with your goals and outcomes. So we definitely wanted to include that. And so related to that, we're going to be sharing the revised annual assessment planning template, very similar to what we've had the last few years. But we've made some tweaks and tried to shorten it, as some of you have probably seen, as well as included a rubric that you can refer to give you some more guidance on the different pieces. And then we'll give time at the end to discuss and share any ideas. And if you all want to take some time to ask one another questions, I find that that's always very, very helpful, as you are sort of the ones like on the grounds doing the work. And then we'll talk about the timeline and how to submit your annual assessment plan. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is for the assessment cycle, there are many different variations of how this all looks, but there is sort of a common, I guess, like a sort of process that you will see with the assessment cycle. I personally like the one from CAS that's presented here. I like that how it's cyclical, but it's, as you can see, there's like the dotted arrows and, the results for improvement, that really is an ongoing piece in the process. When you are starting, in this left corner with your foundational documents, which is your mission goals, your strategic plan, even previous goals and the findings from there, and then establishing that criteria for success. And this really is a very critical component of developing the annual assessment plan, because, it's almost like writing the outline for your paper, if that makes sense. When you can certainly just start writing, but when you have an outline, you have an idea of where you're headed and what you want to see in terms of like what you're assessing. It's certainly very helpful. So we'll talk about this portion. Delivering the program services, the intervention, carrying out the operations. We have student goals and operational goals. And then from there, determining the effectiveness. This is where the measures come in, and then using those results for improvement. And again, that goes right back to those foundational documents. So this is the cycle typically happening on a yearly basis, but certainly open to flexibility depending on your needs throughout the given year. So before we go into the actual goals and outcomes portion, we're going to talk briefly about the mission and the strategic plan. The mission is a piece that you will want to place in the template at the very top. And I find that this is something that units don't typically revisit, which I get, because that's your mission and that's what you're doing on an ongoing basis. But I also feel that as things shift, particularly as we are now transitioning from a mostly, virtual COVID kind of situation, and we've learned a lot along the way. And here we are, sort of still in post-COVID. What is the mission of your unit? So definitely, as you all get together with your teams and do some initial at beginning of the year planning and that sort of thing, highly recommend that you do revisit the mission. And then the strategic plan, we're currently in the 2020-2024 cycle. So we're still in the midst of it. So many of you are probably quite familiar, at least within university life, with the strategic plan in the 4 areas. And so that's something that will also be very important in terms of alignment. So let's take a quick look at the mission. And this is a refresher. It's a 1-sentence statement that describes who you are and what you do, why you do what you do, and shows alignment and draws a conceptual connection to the divisional mission. This is going to be a component in the rubric, which I'll share. And then it's specific to your unit and articulates who your stakeholders are, who your sort of your reach audience is. And so that will be all the different components of the mission as you come up with that. And also, as I said earlier, it's a one sentence statement. So it is something that will need to be succinct, that will sort of capture the work of your department and your unit. And so here are a few examples. We have the mission at George Mason University, and then as an example, our mission within University Life, and then a sentence frame that you could use. It doesn't have to follow in this exact order for your unit. And, it would be recommended a good opportunity for your unit to go back and think about, okay, so if we're looking at University Life, caring for the whole student, promoting inclusive well-being, lifelong learning, and ethical leaders. So there's a couple different pieces there. And so the work that your unit does, how does that tie back to the mission of the division? And then here are the components of 4 goal areas of the University Life strategic plan. And just like the mission, you'll want to ensure that your goals are written in a way where they're aligned to one of these 4 areas. And so, I'm not going to read each of the sentences, but you'll see here we've got inclusive, thriving communities, engage all students, holistic student support services, and organizational excellence. And I recognize that a lot of these descriptors are kind of written in a very high level, kind of conceptual kind of manner. And so it will probably require some delving into what exactly that means. And in our strategic plan, there are further breakdown of what each of these areas mean. And I do feel like we've done a really nice job here in our division of mapping back to these goal areas. I just wanted to re-highlight that. And then another piece is that we have a student learning outcomes document, which I can share in the chat. And there are 6 domains of student learning: the practical competence, global multicultural inclusion, interpersonal competence, social responsibility, well-being, and identity development. And just so that you are aware, we're in the process of just further, it's an ongoing thing, but further refining these 6 areas to hopefully make them even clearer and more accessible to all of you as you write your goals and your outcomes. And this does, I think, map back very nicely with the 4 goal areas of the strategic plan, but also serves as a very distinct, kind of space if you're looking at student learning specific with lots of examples. And so, we'll dig into the goals and the outcomes. Are there any questions before I keep going? Because I know I'm talking quite a bit. I want to pause for just 30 seconds, see if there's any questions, and I'll keep going. We're good. I see thumbs up. Thank you. So for the goal, there is a distinction that you want to be sure that you make between the goal and the outcome. We've heard SMART goals, SMART outcomes. So sure, there's certainly some room for some overlap, but in terms of, how we'd like for you all to set up your goals and your outcomes, just for clarity and whatnot, we want the goal to be very broad. And it's sort of like the nest for where your outcomes will sit. They're very broad statements that go back to the mission, the strategic plan, the student learning goals. And we'd like for you to identify no more than 3 goals for this planning template. You are welcome to have more goals. That's no problem. But in terms of focus and ability to, what is it just your ability to measure and handle sort of all the different pieces that go into reporting and all that, we do want you to try to focus on 3 specific ones, and each goal has 1 or 2 outcomes. And if you have any questions about this portion, you can definitely feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to guide you through that in terms of identifying your top 3. And so when we meet with you for the consultation, you can certainly come with additional ones, and we can work with you to streamline. And so for the outcome, this is where we'll apply the SMART component of, making it very specific. The goal is going to be a lot more broad and generalized. This is where you'll specifically identify what your measure is. Where were you starting before the beginning of this year? What's your baseline, and where do you hope to be by either the fall semester, end of the fall semester, or by the end of the academic year? Is it attainable? Is this something that's doable given, the number of people that you have, the funding, resources, and all of that? And so you definitely want it to be something where you're not stretching yourself so thin that it feels overwhelming. And then relevant, is it tied to all of the pieces that we've discussed? And then this is something that I sometimes see and sometimes don't as clearly in the outcome statement, but identifying that time frame for when you hope to achieve this. And I know that there's like different pieces of the template, or even within TK20, where you can place that information. But if you can put that in the outcome, that would be really nice, because I think it'll help tie everything together. So you would say, well, here's an example actually. We're looking at, this is the learning goal 1C1 is something that comes from the student learning goals that we have in university life. And so it is identifying and utilizing campus and off-campus resources. And so in that divisional goal, then your unit goal could be that students will be able to understand and articulate their individual rights and responsibilities through whatever, delivery of instruction, intervention, program that you have. And so then an example of a SMART outcome is that by the end of, I'm not claiming this to be a really good one, but by the end of the spring 2023 semester, that all the students in this is all made of student development program, will demonstrate understanding of their rights and responsibilities as a student by a score of at least 90% on this inventory that's provided at the end of the year. So there are some things that are happening throughout the year where the students are receiving instruction, and maybe they're in a cohort, maybe they're working on some kind of project, or they're coming more than once to some kind of face-to-face or virtual meeting where they're learning about these things. And certainly when your unit is more program focused, and you're doing like one-time standalone kind of things, it's definitely harder to assess this kind of stuff. So we are aware of that, and I'm happy to work with you to kind of figure out the best ways to assess the work that you're doing. Another thing is that, and this is in the rubric, is that we highly encourage that for you to just continue to be thinking about ways to measure, specifically with student learning, in more direct ways versus indirect measures. And so a direct measure is an actual, assessment of their ability, their process, their knowledge, versus an indirect is more of like a reflection where they're doing a self-report or some kind of survey. Those kinds of things tend to fall under that. And there's certainly a time and place for that. But as much as possible, when you can, thinking about how to measure student learning in a direct way would be highly encouraged, and also to have them well aligned with the SMART outcome. That's what direct measures ensure that, and also that it's determined based on the baseline measures and the current, where the current metric of where students are coming in. So you could do that with some kind of a pre-assessment or some data from previous year. And just a little bit more information about direct measures, why use it? Well, one is that it aligns the student learning evidence with accreditation requirements. So that's another plus. Increases confidence that the students have achieved, what you've hoped for them to learn, and also lessens survey fatigue around asking their opinions, because we know that there's a lot of surveys that generally happen across the board. And some examples of direct measures: rubrics, tests and quizzes, essays, or observations, and then performance evaluations. If we're thinking about like growth, that's an example. I think the rubrics, which I'll share a rubric with you all for this assessment planning. Rubrics can get a little bit overwhelming sometimes, I think, depending on the number of categories. So I do encourage you to have those conversations within your unit and you could always do like a pilot kind of a rubric with some of the students and see, what are the pieces, like, do you really need 5 categories? Are you okay with, 3 and that sort of thing? So keep that in mind as well. And then, even though I told you that this is a really important piece, here I am just presenting one slide on it. But the findings and the improvement plans are definitely components that we don't want to overlook. The rubric does have more details in terms of what we hope to see in your findings, articulates whether or not, from a very practical level, did you meet it? Was it partially met and unmet? And it's okay when there's times where it's partially met or unmet, because that's just the reality, right? Interprets and justifies the findings with relevant supporting evidence. So it's more than just saying, yes, we met it, but how do you know that? And what does this mean? And then moving forward, the improvement plan is that comprehensive action plan to improve the outcomes, whether it's to continue the goal and the outcome into the next fiscal year, determining next steps based on the findings. So even if the outcome has been met and you said we've met it, what does this mean, and how do you interpret this, and what does this mean for the improvement and work of your unit? So I'm going to share the assessment planning template with you all in detail. And before I do want to share this last slide. And I'm sorry that it's kind of skipping around, but this way I don't have to come back to the slide. So in terms of next steps, one thing that we haven't done in the past, that we are asking that you all engage in conversations with the supervisor for your unit to discuss your assessment planning template before you meet with us. And so that we can ensure that, that everything is aligned to the goals, and the goals and the outcomes are aligned to the mission and the strategic plan, but also so that, often, your unit supervisor may be meeting with multiple units. So we'll have a bigger picture look at what's happening across all the umbrella units that fall under their area. And so, just in, like, if there's any like duplicating kind of stuff going on, or places where you all can come together and work together. So this is one thing. And June 15th is kind of it's not set in stone. So just before you submit the annual assessment planning template in the folder, the SharePoint folder, by June 30th. And then we will have our 30-minute one-on-one consultations with Eunkyung and myself, the person who's the TK20 contact, and also the director of the unit. We'll have these conversations sometime between July 6th and 15th. If you do need some flexibility, you can reach out to us and we're happy to work with you. But these are places, the times where we hope that you all can be, so that way we can be prepared for the fall. And this isn't in here, but the July 15th is the deadline for the last year's entry. And then also we are, as you may have heard, transitioning away from TK20 into a new reporting platform in the fall. And so because of that, we're not going to be entering it into TK20 right after, your plans are finalized, but we'll wait until that platform is ready to launch, and then you'll submit it there afterwards. So, but we also still want to have everyone kind of stay on track so we don't lose that momentum. Any questions so far? And then I'll transition to sharing the template and the rubric with everyone. No questions? All right, then let me go ahead and share the template. Okay, start with the template. And I know that many of you are quite familiar with this. So this is the 2023 template that we have. So we're asking that you please identify 3 goals and SMART outcomes. And then we don't have this in this space, but be prepared to discuss any data collection activities with us. So that way, if there's anything that we can do to support you, that we'll be able to do that. And You want to refer to the rubric for any details. And also, as I discussed in the last slide, to please discuss with your associate dean, unit supervisor, to confirm alignment before submission to OIP. So you'll input this information, the name of your unit, who the unit lead is, the associate dean, and then the University of Life missions right here, just for your information and access, and then the mission for your unit. So then you'll put in your 3 goals here in this section. So it will be, we'll go right here. And then underneath is the goal type, and it would be a drop down. So you could say if it's a program goal or a student learning goal. And some of you may just have program goals. And then you would pick if your program goal or student goal is aligned to one of these 4 strategic goal areas. Student goal, if you could pick one of these S's, the student goal areas, that would be awesome. So we could see what you've aligned that to. And then 1 outcome is required, but the additional ones are optional. So that's all you have to place here. You would just state, by this time frame, this is the metric that we hope to achieve. And then with the rubric, let's go here. So we have 4 categories: exemplary, proficient, developing, and incomplete. And that is there for each of the different areas, with the mission. An exemplary mission would be the pieces that I talked about in the presentation to show alignment, specific to the unit, articulate stakeholders, and concise. And so with proficient, there's, maybe, the specific pieces are there, but the alignment may not be as clear. Developing is where it's a lot more general, maybe it's long and not as easy to read and that kind of thing. So that one should be pretty straightforward. With the SMART outcome, if you follow the pieces of the SMART acronym, you should be good. And if there's places where it's challenging for you, feel free to reach out to us and we can see if there's something we could offer in terms of support and suggestions. And I don't know, maybe there's times where it may just not be realistic or practical. We can talk about that as well. And then measure that it's well aligned, that what your baseline measure is, and that it's a direct measure and an indicator of some kind of change in their ability, their process, the performance. And then the pieces about the findings down here is that it was met, it interprets and justifies the findings, appropriate conclusions, and then relevant supporting evidence. And then the last piece were the improvements, comprehensive action plan, the timeline is there, any kind of resources required, and next steps, even if your outcome has been met. We do want to emphasize that. And then the findings and improvement sections will be completed at the end of the annual assessment cycle. So you would only need to do these yellow portions that we have here. But you can certainly reflect on these green portions as you're going back to rewriting your goals and your outcomes.